This is Ship It with Justin Garrison and Autumn Nash, a podcast about everything that happens after Git Push. Ship It is brought to you by Fly.io, the home of changelog.com. Launch your apps close to your users all around the world. Learn how at Fly.io.
Hello and welcome to Ship It, the podcast all about everything that happens after you Git push. I'm your host, Justin Garrison, and with me as always is Autumn Nash.
Hi.
That was a very quick hi.
I always sound like a bird. Like I'm always like, I swear I'm not this squeaky in real life.
On today's show, we have Gina, who is the maintainer and creator of the OctoPrint project, which was not only an awesome time talking to her and just learning more about how it started, but as a user of OctoPrints back in the day with my printers, it was really fun just to see how all the things that she has to do for this project, like the testing frameworks, how to roll out updates, and all of that was really cool. Just to learn so much about everything she's done over the last decade of managing this project.
She was one of the most fun guests because just everything she said was, I had this problem and then this is how I solved it. Like, she's an amazing problem solver. Like, Gina is legit, guys. And the fact that she's one of the few people to really make it really successfully at being an open source maintainer that is crowdfunded, like, dude, she deserves it. She deserves so much.
And not just for a little while, right? This is for 10 years of a project, which is why it's cool.
That's what I'm saying. Like, sustainably being the only maintainer for an open source project that is that widely used is amazing.
Especially one that's not like corporate sponsored, right? Because there's like she mentioned most of her sponsorships come from the community, not from companies. Because if you look at something like curl or these other like projects that are used by developers heavily, it makes sense that like a company might sponsor them a little bit more to say, hey, you save our developers a bunch of time, we're going to give you some money. But in this case, it's an open source, community driven project that's mainly for hobbyists. I mean, some people do sell stuff, but it's not big corporations. They have much larger 3D printers that cost a lot more money. And in this case, it's like, I have a 3D printer. I've had a 3D printer, or at least access to a 3D printer, for about 10 years now. And I off and on, I'm like, hey, do I want OctoPrint? Is there another management tool? Whatever it is, but it's always been a hobby for me. I don't make money from it. It's just like another way to spend time.
That's what I'm saying. It's like it's almost one of the most like pure versions of what open source maintaining and crowdfunding, like an example of how it can be done right.
So let's go ahead and jump into the interview. And I know for the outro, Autumn's making a game for me. So stick around and we will see how that goes.
What's up, friends? I'm here in the breaks with Sama Alam Naylor from Sentry, Senior Developer Advocate. Let's talk about the levels of error monitoring. So let's talk about error monitoring with medium to large-ish teams. And I don't even know how to quantify that necessarily to say maybe it's a team of 5 or 8. Maybe that's a medium team. Maybe medium to largest is like 20 plus, 50 plus engineers. You got multiple teams, you got multiple services, you got multiple disciplines within the engineer organization. How does Sentry go from indie dev, solo application developer, or a small team to scaling to support larger to mid-sized teams? What changes?
So it's interesting that you mentioned microservices. And often these days, when you have larger teams or you have multiple teams in an organization working on a product, you will have your application split out into little projects, different repos, microservices. And sometimes it can be difficult to know where an error is coming from. For example, if you just send all your errors to one place. And sometimes it might be difficult to know where the error started and where the error finished up. But what's really good with Sentry is that we have this concept called tracing. With Sentry tracing, you essentially connect your back and front ends together. If you want to know the details about it, it's through an HTTP header. And that's how Sentry will trace your requests from one service to the next, from the back end to the front end. And so in the Sentry app itself, you can physically trace what happened from where the request originated on the front end, then all the different services that the request passes through to, and then back to the front end, and then be able to identify exactly where the problem happened and exactly what in the front end triggered it or what in the back end triggered it. You can view the source codes and the stack traces all related to it. And then what you can do is, based on where the error came from, you can then automatically assign those issues to particular members of particular teams using things like maybe custom tags or other kind of identifiers on the issue itself. And so it helps you triage, like Sentry gives you that separation, yet also brings it all together to help you understand the bigger picture, the smaller things about what went wrong in like a fine-grained way, and then allows you to configure the app itself to perform particular actions depending on what happened. You know, like a lot of the time, large teams can actually get inundated with a lot of noise. I remember working for a company where we had two teams, a back end and a front end team, but everyone was getting every single error from everywhere. And so what happens eventually is you ignore all of the errors. Oh, it's failing as expected. It's just noise. It's getting in the way of my day-to-day coding. But if you are more selective about the types of alerts that you send and that you receive as someone who's doing a particular job, you'll be less likely to ignore them, more likely to address the root cause. And then eventually you will have no alerts and no bugs, and your application will be perfect.
Okay, get Sentry, go fix it. Too easy. Check them out at sentry.io. That's sentry.io. And make sure you use our code changelog and you'll get $100 off the team plan, which is super awesome. Again, use the code changelog, get $100 off the team plan, sentry.io.
Thank you so much, Gina Häußge, for joining us on the show today. And can you tell us about yourself and how you got started with creating OctoPrint?
Yeah, so you already said my name, but I'm also known as Fusel around the world, and especially around the net. So if anyone has come across that name, then yeah, that's me. Hi. And yeah, well, OctoPrint, that happened basically when I got myself a 3D printer back in late 2012 and found myself in a position that it was sitting here next to me in my home office, producing noise, producing fumes, and annoying the hell out of me because I just wanted to not sit next to it while it was doing stuff, but it took hours to finish whatever it was doing. And so I figured there must be some way to just put it in another room, but still monitor it from afar through Wi-Fi and such. And I figured there's probably something out there that does this. It turns out, nope, there wasn't something like this. And I happen to be a software engineer, so that became a bit of my vacation project over Christmas pretty much. And I threw it on GitHub after that in January and thought I was done. Back then it was just a really, really basic thing, monitoring temperature, already having this feedback loop where you also had some webcam implementation and all of that to be able to see what your 3D printer was doing while it was running through your jobs and some basic file management and such, but definitely way smaller a project than it is now over 10 years later. I threw it on GitHub, and within a week or so, the emails started coming in and the feature requests started coming in. And then it took over my life, and now I've been doing it full time for almost 10 years. And
Wow.
crowdfunded for, we do have 2024 now. So that must be 8 years, I think. Yeah, 8 years full-time crowdfunded work.
That's
on
awesome.
An open source project.
That's one of those success stories of open source and crowdfunding, right? Like, because that's not a common thing for, it's like, oh, one person started a project and now you can actually make your living off of this hobby or originally hobby sort of thing. And that's really awesome just to hear that it's the community around it has come together to be able to support such a cool project.
Yeah, and it's always something that I can talk about at parties, even if people don't know what 3D printing is or what open source is. If I tell them people give me money, even though they don't have to, then I always get interest from all of the people around me.
2012. What printer was even available 2012? That's like the CNC cupcake machine.
In my case, it was an Ultimaker. That was like, a big wooden box, no heated bed,
Yeah, no, no one even knew what to do there.
very slow and very weird. And the filament was still thicker. Like, it printed with the 3mm stuff, which actually was 2.85 millimeters, but still, almost twice the diameter of what we use these days mostly. So 1.751.
It's like melting crayons.
Yeah.
Like-
It was weird when I got my first roll of filament of 1.75 millimeter filament in my hands. It felt so weird and not good, and like it would break just by looking at it and such, because I was just used to all of this 2.85. And then I think last year or so I threw out all of the old 285 that I still had and looked at it, and it looked so heavy and strong, and what that I was able to print with that? No way. So yeah, things really changed.
So in 10 years of OctoPrint, how many printers do you support? It seems like it grows every time I check it out.
Yeah, so the thing is that most printers out there actually run on open source firmware and have more or less agreed on a communication protocol. I say more or less because a lot of the printer vendors actually adjust the firmware, often without really knowing what they are doing, with the result that they break the firmware in the process, and then things get really tricky for the users, because then usually they do not know how to fix it. And in the end, that is always when I'm very happy that I also build a plugin system into OctoPrint, because that allows to work around these things so that people can just, if they have a printer like that and also happen to know how to code, or can find someone who can see the issue and work around it, or maybe if it's a large enough community, then maybe I can also do that, is just build a little plugin that pretty much translates from the broken firmware into something that is more standard conform. And that way, pretty much everything that is sold out there is supported by OctoPrint. But these days it gets a bit more tricky, because a whole bunch of printers are now currently coming out that have a full-blown host system. So OctoPrint is a so-called print host. And a lot of printers now come with something similar, fully blown on board. So they only now have a Wi-Fi interface. They often have an integrated full graphical display and such. And it is really tricky now to access these and use them with something that the vendor did not plan on, which is a bit sad.
That's how my son's printer, well, he has a toy box, so it's meant for little kids to use with their iPad. So in a way, it kind of monitors, but it kind of makes it limited what you can do with it, because it comes with its own software and everything.
Yeah, I switched off from a Ender Pro to a Bamboo, and the Bamboo is pretty much self-contained.
Closed source?
Yeah, closed source. And it was like... I had such a hard time, because I had so many printers in the past that I always wanted them to be open source, and I wanted them to work certain ways, and I always spent more time fiddling with them than using them and printing. And so I saw recommendations for the Bamboo, and I'm like, I'm going to try it. I'm going to go with this one. I know it's closed source. They have a whole ecosystem of stuff. And I think the problem is going to be when things break and I can't fix a problem, or I can't troubleshoot and find a community around like, hey, how does this work? It's all just going to be like, oh, well, here's a janky fix we have that like shows you how to do something.
There's good news for you, though. Someone wrote a plugin that allows Bamboo printers to work with OctoPrint.
Really?
Oh, that's awesome.
Really.
I really want a Bamboo, so that's why I'm just like...
I'm not sure if it works with all of the models and such, but it's the plugin developer basically on OctoPrint. Like he's the one with the many plugins.
I keep watching everyone's videos on Twitter and like TikTok, and I want a Bamboo so bad, but I'm like, I don't want to get locked into like the software. Yeah.
I'm not touching that with a 10-foot pole. It's... I saw one in person with a buddy, and mechanically I was very, very impressed. But then also this news hit recently, or what recently, that's almost been a year now or so, I think, where they had this funny security issue where some printers suddenly fetched the wrong stuff from the cloud and started printing in the middle of the night, some models from strangers. And that is just something...
I did not hear about that.
Yeah, and like stuff like this happens, then this is a big, big no for me. And also the part with all of what 3D printing is these days, what 3D printing has come to over the last 10 years, that was done on the shoulder of open source.
Mhm.
And now all of these companies, it's not just Bamboo, it's a bunch of others as well, are just rolling in and trying to lock everything down and trying to lock everything in and creating their own little gardens. And it's just not the way that I want to see all of this happening. I'm a bit afraid that we will like lose all of the open access that we have now if stuff continues like that.
I think open source as a whole, like databases, everything has gotten really weird with where do we go from here with like having companies and open source.
License
So,
changes.
yeah, it's been very interesting.
Now back to OctoPrint for a bit. I saw you had a release last week. What does that release process look like? Because you have this huge system that supports all of these printers and you have these plugins and all of these features. How do you actually go about releasing and testing that to say like this is a new release of OctoPrint?
So it should be obvious that it's pretty much impossible to test every possible printer, firmware, plug-in, operation system, starting state of software situation. So what I do before I actually roll out a full release is there goes a long phase of release candidates. And OctoPrint has a release branch system built in. So if you feel fine with testing stuff that is not necessarily fully stable yet, then you can just switch over to another release branch and then you will get release candidates whenever I push those out. And they actually get the same procedure that I do for every single release. And I will go quickly over that later as well. But the idea behind that is that if I have something like 1,000, 2,000 people out there testing a release candidate and putting it through several years of print duration over the course of the release candidate phase, and then I can be pretty sure that a lot of these combinations that I would never be able to test has been tested. And yeah, it usually takes something like 3 to 4 release candidates until no more bugs come in. And at that point, then I declare this stable. And of course, after I've pushed out a stable release, so the current stable version is 1.10, but we are now already at 1.10.1. So there are bug fix releases that I also push out. Those do not go through a full release candidate phase again, but they only get bug fixes and maybe small minor improvements of existing functionality. They do not get new features. They do not get big changes. They obviously also get security fixes, stuff like that, but I try to really limit what goes in there. And if it feels too risky, then it goes into the next stable release that will actually get the full release candidate phase again. And what I do for every single release is, so OctoPrint can basically run anywhere where you can run Python. But most people run it on a Raspberry Pi, so that is also what I concentrate on for testing. And there is this dedicated image that someone else is maintaining, Guy Scheffer, for OctoPrint, which is called OctoPi. And a lot of people confuse the image with the software and the software with the image, which also causes a lot of complications in support. But anyhow, so OctoPi is the most common environment that OctoPrint will be installed on out there. So what I have here is I built myself a little test rig that has 3 Raspberry Pi 3s, which is the current basic option that I suggest. So get a 3 because that basically is the best thing that you can get, the lowest supported version. And if you want something with more power, then of course you can get something else. But the 3 is like the base version that I look at. So I have 3 Raspberry Pi 3s there, and all of these have a little card adapter in there that can be switched through USB, either to act as a mass storage device through a host on the one end, or as an SD card on the other hand. So that is slotted into the SD card slot of each of the Raspberry Pis, and all of these then go into a USB hub to a 4th Raspberry Pi, a Raspberry Pi 4 actually, which I call the flash host. And that thing also has control over the little powered USB hub through which I power the 3 Raspberry Pis. And now I can individually power them on and off. And I can also individually unmount and mount their SD cards and flash them without having to physically release the SD card and push it into a flashing stick and then flash. That is what I did until 2020, and it was driving me nuts because
Well, that's what I've been doing. No, like this sounds fascinating. I didn't even know you could have like an SD card on one end it's like connected to the USB on the other side, and you can switch it back and forth.
there is, that one of these things costs me $100, but they exist, and a little.
Hey, sometimes that $100 is worth it.
Yeah, that saves how much time? That's
Yeah, I mean, I have 3. That was really worth the money that I spent on that, because what I do on every release is basically I flash a whole bunch of starting versions on the Raspberry Pis, like OctoPi version X with OctoPrint version Y. And then I look if I can upgrade to the release to be from that version through all of the regular update mechanism. And for that, of course, I need not only flash the SD card, but also provision it with the Wi-Fi credentials and then SSH into that thing and do all of that. And all of this is automated now, thanks to this little test rig that I built. So I just tell it, flash device A to this version of OctoPi, make sure OctoPrint is at that version, and also switch it to this release branch. And then please also fire up the browser when it's done with that. And so before every release, I have this huge checklist in my tooling and go through all of that. And of course, the usual stuff like create new tags, create a change log, make sure the translation is up to date. The German one, this is the only one that I maintain. Everything else needs to be supplied by people who actually speak the language fluently that they are targeting. Also add supporter names and all of that. And then there's also always a whole test matrix that I write down in JSON that gets rendered into a little table. And that then tells me exactly what command line I have to enter into my scripting so that all of this will be done. Then I wait, then a browser window pops up, then I click update, then I look if everything works. And once I've gone through all of these, usually something between 7 to 10 test scenarios, which used to take a whole day and now takes less than an hour if I'm lucky.
Wow, that's cool.
Your automation is very impressive.
It saved me so much time. It's every single release, I'm sitting here and have this huge smile because that saved me so much time. Yeah, and I also have a blog post about this test rig.
Does it have pictures?
It has pictures.
I need to find that so we can add it.
I can drop you the link and you can put it in the show notes and something.
Yeah.
And what happens then is at some point I'm through all of this and then I'm happy and stuff. And then I do the regular release thing. So I just click on release on the GitHub release. I have already filled in the changelog on all of that. And what now happens is a whole workflow runs through GitHub Actions, which first of all runs the whole test suite against everything. The unit tests are done. The end-to-end tests are done. And only if all of this is green and stuff is actually even released on PyPI and such as well, it triggers the test rig again. Because what it will do now is it will automatically build an updated image with the new OctoPrint version, so a new OctoPi version with the new OctoPrint version. All of that will happen in GitHub Actions. And then when this image is built, then the Flash host in my network here at home on my desk will be triggered to download this image, fire it against the Pi, flash it, run the end-to-end tests against it. And if that is green, I get a little email in my inbox that says, hey, this image tested green. Do you want to release it? And if I then click yes, then it will be released to the wild, basically.
This is like the software engineer dream. You found something that you're interested in. You built it over like Christmas break, and then you solved this awesome problem, and then you automated it and solved all these problems to make it like efficient. It's so cool. I'm so impressed.
How many core maintainers are on OctoPrint? Is it just you?
It's just me.
What software were you writing before OctoPrint?
Enterprise Java stuff.
There you go. So you went Java to Python, basically.
Yeah, Python was self-taught. Started when I was my career was a bit weird. I started actually working at university because I wanted to do a PhD, and I worked at university. So in Germany, it's like you have some work. Either you are teaching or you are doing something administration, and at the same time you're working towards your PhD. And I ended up in the administration part. So I was administering the whole department's servers, all of them on really old Unix, not Linux, Unix machines. The mail server was older than me. And not really finding much time for my PhD, but automating a lot of stuff back then, even already for the administrative tasks with Python. And then at some point I decided, yeah, okay, so the PhD thing isn't happening. I'm not getting really enough time to work on that. And to be honest, I was more drawn to doing something like really with my hands and not just writing stuff and having students do the stuff with their hands. So I ended up as a software engineer in the industry and ended up writing a bunch of software like in Java, IPTV related, actually for a big telecommunication company. And that went on for half a decade. And then I got myself a 3D printer, and that the rest is history. So
That's so cool.
And you said you've been crowdfunded for 8 years now.
yeah.
So 8 years ago, you had to make this decision to leave your job and go do.
That decision was forced on me because the thing was 10 years ago already, I left this Java job because I was hired by a Spanish company who also was vendor of 3D printers back then. They found me, they found OctoPrint, they liked what I was doing, and they hired me full time to work on that back in 2014. But then in 2016, they ran out of money and have since also gone under completely, as far as I know. So they had to let me go. And now I found myself in the position that I had been doing OctoPrint for almost 2 years at this point, full time. Like it had grown a lot, the amount of work that it needed, maintenance work, community, and all of that had grown. But yeah, I was no longer getting paid for it. So it was the decision that I had to do, either try to do it as a side project again, which was an absolute no at this point already, because when I was still doing it as a side project the first 2 or so years, that was already bad for my health. Drop it altogether, which was something that I really did not want to do, and go back to a regular, normal 9 to 5 kind of job. Or do something that I never thought I would ever do and try to just take this step into the darkness where I did not know at all what was going to happen, and try to do this crowdfunded and basically self-employed. And yeah, I figured if I would not at least try that, I would probably kick myself for the rest of my life and asking myself what could have been. So I jumped into the cold water and did it. And so far it's been working.
I do find it interesting that the like commercialized spin wasn't even an option for you there, right? Like you could have like tried to raise money and say like, this is gonna be a product, I'm gonna make a new business out of it. And you have this open core model, sort of like paid plugins, whatever you want to do, right? Like that's so many companies do that. And that's how they get started, because it was a side project or it was something they're interested in. And for you, it was like, I either abandon it or I do it all community. And that's awesome.
Yeah, I'm really not that big of a fan of this whole open core thing. And personally, I also felt like I could not really do that because I forked off of open source software. So the part that talks to your printer was something that I basically took from a slicer of all things, because that already was talking to Cura. Cura had a communication part that I could just take over. A lot of people had contributed. So going like, yeah, I'm going to close this down now and we are only going to keep an open core, it just felt wrong, and to this day feels wrong. And I believe in open source, and I find it a bit weird that it's still news for people out there that, yeah, open source in general should be something that should be funded. We shouldn't have to jump through hoops by selling stuff around it, because what we do with maintaining open source is already a full-time job.
Now, I don't know if you can go into details, but where does your funding come from? Is that from like recurring businesses that say, hey, we want to pay for you to?
No, that's mostly users. I have some business sponsorships, but most of the people are really just, yeah, your average OctoPrint user who has 1 or 2 or something printers and just likes what I'm doing and throws me something between $1 to $5 per month. And if you have a whole lot of people who do that, then this matters. So,
do you know how many installs you have, or roughly how many?
Yeah, so I have anonymous usage tracking built into OctoPrint. All of this also self-built, completely GDPR okay-ish, and only on my own servers with my own tech stack and all that. And this is completely opt-in, however. So if people do not say, yes, it's okay to track me, then I will never know about the install. But according to that, I have around 150,000 instances out there. And based on some fun install stats from the PyWheels project, who suddenly saw huge download spikes on the packages they host for Raspberry Pi, whenever I pushed out a new update, I know that the number is likely around 10 times higher.
Yeah, I was gonna say 150,000 opted in.
Yeah,
That is usually a very small percentage of people that are like, yes, I will let you get this information. That's awesome.
Which means it's probably like even more people. Yeah.
Right. Well, yeah. It's like if you estimate 10 times more, that's 1.5 million. Meh, I could see that. That's totally not even out of realm.
the first time that I saw the first numbers come in after the first release with the anonymous users checking, I literally hid under my desk because that was just, I felt so much responsibility in that moment, and it felt so heavy, literally heavy on my shoulders. I just had this, I just had to hide. So I just sat down under my table and breathed deeply and took a minute.
I hope that your success story, like, I hope people like hear about it, because that's so cool that I feel like you did the like moral right thing that people say that you can't do and still be successful. And you not only have been successful, but like just as like an engineer, somebody like just people are using something that you made, like tons of people, and they like it so much that they like want to pay you for it. That is so cool. Just to see that many people using your stuff.
Yeah, and it's also, I consider it my life's work. I mean, I don't know if I will do this forever, especially not given the whole open source printer situation that we talked about briefly, because at some point I might just get pushed out of the market by a tendency to locking everything down. But yeah, it definitely feels like I have done something that actually has helped people, which is not something that I can say about my previous job, I have to say. So
Enterprise Java helping people?
Yeah.
I don't know. Sorry, Autumn, no shade.
A lot of stuff runs on Java, okay?
A lot of stuff does. I just when you mix those two words of enterprise and Java, I don't have any good memories.
It's more the enterprise bit also that
It's more the enterprise than the
in
Java,
hindsight.
for sure.
The Java itself was okay, and I mean you can also build good software in that, and you could also build performance software in that, and it's not as slow as people always said. But on the other hand, I also have to say that with Python everything got even faster. So not in the run speed, but in the development speed. Like so much less overhead and.
Well, that's just because your variable names aren't sentence long, right? It's just
You didn't see the first kind of Python that I wrote when I was writing Java during the day and then at night. So a bunch of stuff is still not in snake caps, but in the other one. So
camel case. Yeah.
Camel case. Thank you.
Yeah.
Because I mean, I was a Java developer.
Going back and forth, I always mess up like the for loops in certain things. You can tell I've gone back and forth too many times.
Oh, I can top that. I mean, OctoPrint is pretty much a web application, and the backend is written in Python, but the front end is JavaScript. And switching between Python and JavaScript is almost as bad as switching between Python and Java, because I go back to Python, I start putting semicolons behind every single line, and I go from Python to JavaScript, and I just try to start my blocks with colons. Instead of braces.
Yeah.
And it's just annoying.
It's so funny. Like there's certain things that you can definitely tell that you've gone back and forth between two languages when you like look at your errors and you're like, damn it, I did it again.
Yeah. And it happens daily. Just yesterday, I can't remember what exactly it was. I just remember that yesterday I was again, no, Gina, this is not Python, when I was editing a JavaScript file. And
I do that all the time.
It's tricky.
So where do you want to bring OctoPrint from here? Like, what's the next thing that you would like to do? What is the next sort of like big, like, it's not just, more printers are fine. I mean, I still think that you have influenced that standard of communication by having this early project so long that was be able to, talk to all these printers. You have this plugin system. What's the next thing you want to do? What's the next cool thing that you're like, I would love if OctoPrint could do this?
There's a bunch of stuff that actually needs to be done, which boils down more or less to taking care of some tech stack situations, because I'm still on a very old version of all of the stuff that runs the UI. But because of the plugin system, it's really tricky to update that or to swap that for something new, because all of the UI of all of the plugins out there would suddenly stop working. And I've spent a lot of thought into how to approach this, and especially how to best get this working. And I'm still in the process of doing this. This is one of the bigger parts that I'm working on. Also, for the better part of a decade, actually, I've now been also working on a new communication layer. And that is also a very tricky thing to pull off. And I also have had really bad luck with it, because every time that I actually get on it and get it to a point where I'm almost ready to, like, I'm 80% or 90% to something happens. So the first time I ran into a complete and utter problem with my whole approach because of some firmware issues out there that I wasn't aware of. So I had to scrap everything and start anew. The second time I lost the job and had to go crowdfunding. The third time I ended up in a breakup after over 15 years of a relationship. The third time or fourth time, I don't remember, something like COVID happened. And so, like, I'm almost too scared now to work on that anymore, but
that's a lot.
It's like this huge project that really needs to get done to make everything more modular and to be able to make it easily adaptable to new developments out there, and to possibly also swap the whole communication stack out to target something else than serial communication, like something like network or so. But the only problem is that it is a project in it of itself. English at this time of the day. And as I already said, I am the only maintainer. So I also have to take care of all the bug fixes, all the security fixes, all the other new features, all of the community management, architecture stuff.
How do you push all the developers and different people that are making the plugins to the next version so you can eventually do an update?
I deprecate stuff, write big, nasty warnings into changelogs, hope that someone actually reads them, that at some point, some versions later, remove the deprecated stuff after it was logging warnings and warnings and warnings to the logs for several months. And if stuff then breaks, plugin developers can suddenly react quite fast, I learned.
Only after it breaks.
Yeah.
I mean, nobody listens to the warnings for like 5 years, 10 years.
I had this quite nasty situation that, Python 2 to Python 3.
That was such a horrible jump, though. Like, it was so bad.
It's still going on. This is like...
And I was right in the middle of it, because all of the plugins out there were Python 2 only. OctoPrint was Python 2 only. And it took a long time to get OctoPrint up and running. And that was also thanks to a lot of very, very nice contributors who helped there, doing a lot of the legwork, and then spending half a year or so ironing out all the bugs that were introduced in the process. Pushing out blog posts, pushing up tools that would help people to move over, marking plugins as Python 2 or Python 3 compatible automatically on the plugin repository by looking at the code automatically and detecting if it would compile under Python 3 or not. And it was an absolute nightmare, but somehow we pulled it off. But
that sounds exhausting.
It was exhausting. And 5% of OctoPrint's user base, according to the anonymous usage tracking, is still on Python 2.
Wow.
And at this point, I just have given up trying to motivate
It'll never
them.
die.
Yeah, I mean, OctoPrint is Python 3 exclusive now since version 6? 5? I have no idea, actually. Something like mid-2020 or so. I can't remember exactly. And there are still people who are left on the Python 2 only version, who I redirected to take their updates from somewhere else just in case there was anything that I still needed to push out, but so far have never done anything and will now also not do, because those 5%, they can just, like, if a security issue or something like that shows up, they really should just finally do the jump.
Yeah, they need to.
It's like when people try to get people off of Java 8. It's like never dying.
Yeah.
Old software.
I can imagine. My knowledge is still stuck on Java 7.
You talked about some things you'd want to make changes in the future. Looking back of more than 10 years of building this project, what do you wish you would have done differently
I would have done so many architecture decisions differently that are now biting me in my behind over and over again.
How do you make sure you like, because a lot of that comes from just learning, either scaling the projects and needs to change over time, or you didn't know how it worked back then and you just learned a new way of doing it now. Like, how would you go back in time and like teach yourself, oh, you should do it this way instead? Is there a way?
Do you have a time machine? Apart from that, I mean, I think most of the stuff, if I just had known any better, so if I had found some more information on some things, then yeah, that would have saved me a lot of work. I mean, some of the problems I actually just managed to iron out with the current release, because I basically have 2 web server situations going on. I have Tornado sitting in there, single-threaded async, and on that I have Flask sitting, which is sync. So that is really a bad idea. You do not want to mix that up. But in 2012, Gina didn't know it any better than that. And now I know.
Flask talked a big game at that time. Like, it's not even your fault.
The good thing is that I found a solution for that, which means we had huge performance gains in the latest version that I just pushed out now, because now I managed to make the whole connection between the 2 things async as well, so that they don't block each other anymore. And so the whole web page loads faster now, and it's way less likely that some third-party plugin can now block the whole server as well. And but these are things that if I had known them back then, if I had just better understood the kind of stuff that I was working on, because I mean, I didn't know about 3D printing protocols back then. I didn't know about Flask. I didn't know about Tornado. I didn't know about all of that. I was just like, okay, this might maybe work. And if I connect this here and then there and blah, and then I added a plugin system on top, and that made everything way more complicated, because now you have an ecosystem. You cannot just rip out parts anymore without destroying parts of the ecosystem in the process. And so that is what is now making things way more complicated.
In your defense, though, like 3D printing has grown so much in the last decade, and releasing software in general has grown so much. Like, you sound extremely knowledgeable about all of these things, and I don't know if anyone could learn them as well if you weren't just doing it, you know? Like, you know all these things because you built it and you maintained it and you had to make those hard decisions. So it seems like you're doing a great job to me.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I'm still here, right? So it can't be too bad. And yeah, the things I now know about 3D printing firmware, and especially about the differences between the various variations, honestly, I wish I didn't know as much sometimes. There be dragons.
The curse of knowledge. Yeah.
Not just that, but I feel like it's always that struggle of like, you learned it at like 2 a.m. because of something went wrong or something, you know, like, because like it went sideways and you had to learn it.
That's something, by the way, I also learned. I never do releases after Wednesday anymore, because that gives me Thursday, and even though it's usually my day off because I'm on a 4-day work week, if push comes to shove, gives me Friday, and it doesn't ruin my whole weekend. I did a bunch of releases on Fridays, and it cost me one too many weekends.
Never push to prod on Friday.
Yeah, that is the real wisdom of this podcast right now, is like, people say like, don't push on Friday, and you're like, no, don't push after Wednesday. Like, if you're pushing on Thursday or Friday, you're just asking for it.
That is the perfect bake time to get like
someone else to try and then call you, and that is like, they need a day. There's
no testing like real users wanting to use your software in a way that you never imagined.
Oh yeah.
like, you can't just, that's why I think you obviously do as much testing as you can, but getting real people to try it, like the way that you said that you do, like that release where people can try your other branches, like so they can bake properly.
I feel like that needs to be a shirt, Autumn. It's like, test with users. It's like,
I mean, there's nothing like, it is nothing like some real person being like, I wonder what you could do if I put this here. Yeah. And you're like, why would you do that? Or they
have like some crazy workflow where you're just like, what?
Yeah.
Like, when you do what? Like, oh yeah, no, I drop to the web console every time and I type my command commands manually in JavaScript. You're
they're like, but like I want to use the UI and the CLI and then do this. So then you're just like, but why?
Exactly.
Like, why would you do that?
But you have produced some stable software if after a huge new a minor release, only such stuff comes in.
It's only the weird
And
use case.
this time, I can say that I managed to do that. I got only really, really weird, really odd stuff.
That's an achievement.
Right? I thought so as well.
Not just that, but the fact that you automated all that by yourself and you were the main maintainer, you are amazing. Like, amazing.
You need to keep in mind, I automated that because I am the only maintainer, so that I had more time to do the main.
Yeah, but you still had to do the automation. Like, I know it makes your life easier, but like sometimes like you will sit there and it takes longer to automate stuff than like, I mean, you get it back obviously after a while, but like,
well, not always, right? I mean, you can spend the whole week automating something that you do once a year. And in this case, you're like, oh no, this taste went from a day to an hour is a good use of automation.
Because we've all automated something and we were like, this is going to be great. And then it takes longer to automate than it does to do it, man. You're like, why? Yep. Why did I do this to myself? Like 8 hours in.
I'm into home automation, so I have this a lot.
I love that stuff. Me too. Like, but I'm just like, there's certain things and I'm just like, that was such a bad idea. But like, you'll never know until you do it.
The good thing is you often still learn something new in the process. So even if it's all for the...
That's what I'm saying. Like you, like just listening to you talk about it, I'm like, man, like your knowledge is just insane. Like you must just know the ins and outs of so much of this because of the way that like, you're like, and then I had this problem and then I found this awesome way to fix it. And I'm like, how did you do this by yourself? Like, that is amazing. Okay, but what do you print at home? Like, did you make your own 3D printer or do you have like...
No, I actually always just get something from the shelf basically. And
So what's your favorite 3D printer?
I'm not sure if I would call it a favorite. I have a very old Prusa Mark III by now that I have modified a whole lot. And that works and works and works and works. And I actually just printed a guitar with it that I gave away as a birthday present to the father of my partner, who was really, really happy about that. And yeah.
Do you have anywhere that you post the stuff that you 3D print? Because I just want to like follow all the stuff that you print because it has to be awesome.
Sometimes on Mastodon, sometimes on printables, but mostly probably on Mastodon. So chaos.social/@Fusel. And that's also where I post everything pretty much that I make. Currently, I'm more into making print and play board games for some reason that just suddenly started making.
Oh, that's cool.
I just made a card game again this morning. So it's a weird thing.
Because I feel like at the amount of you were 3D printing when like it wasn't even like a big hobby, you know? And the fact that you have like, you created all this software, I'm like, you have to be making cool things. Like you,
mostly
this was created
stuff,
out
really,
of.
I have to say. So I printed some parts from my bike, like for mounting the two locks that I have to the frame, and for mounting the radar unit that I have to tell me when a car is coming from back and such stuff like that. Then together with a buddy, we did a whole project for the Chaos Communication Congress and the Chaos Communication Camp last year, which were basically little environment sensors that we put into little gnome figures. And I printed all of these gnome figures.
You are like the human problem solver. Like
that is
how
actually
many
my
problems
superpower.
has she talked about that she solved? Like, you know what I like? She's the epitome of like engineering brain. She's like, I had this problem, then I made that. I'm just like, I just want to be your friend. Like, you are amazing. Like, you're just like you're just like, and then I solved this automation problem, and then I like realized we needed this, and I'm just like, like you make all the things.
This is actually the reason why I got a 3D printer, because I had all of these ideas constantly how to solve certain issues in a household, like just around the home. But I never had a way to do that. And then I got a 3D printer, and suddenly everything looked like a nail for my new hammer. And then later I got a laser cutter, and then I got a vinyl cutter. And
can we just talk about you should be Gina Häußge, the problem solver?
Yeah.
But like you've got to add to like that like
Part of
like,
its official title now.
I love it. Yes.
That is actually one of my best skills. Yeah, that is something that also back when I was still a Java engineer person was constantly.
You're always going to have problems and always end up with like, you know, adversities, but just the fact that your attitude is like, okay, we have this problem and we're going to fix it this way, like that is amazing. You are going to be successful for it.
The only downside of it is that sometimes my brain won't shut up. Because then it is, you know, like when you're lying in bed and you're trying to sleep and your brain is going, oh, by the way, you might be able to solve this that way, or you could do this and such. So I'm now taking to listening to audiobooks so that I can actually fall asleep, because otherwise this stupid thing just won't shut up.
But then the audiobook gets good. I live that problem all the time.
I have a trick up my sleeve. I only listen to audiobooks I have already read. So I know what happens. So I can.
She solved that problem too.
See, she's a problem solver. Because I'm like, I have the same brain. I feel like it doesn't do the same cool problem solving that you do. Like I'm trying to get on your level one day. Like I'm not there yet. But like, it's always like, and then this, and then you should do this, and then you need to make a list for this. And I'm like, can you shut up? I'm trying to sleep. But then I'm like, oh, the book just got good.
I just give it something to listen to, and then it shuts up. And because I already know it, I get tired and I sleep. It doesn't work with podcasts. It doesn't work with books. I don't already know, because then I want to actually, you know, listen and know what happens. But
Gina has all the secrets, guys. All the secrets.
Gina, this has been a fantastic conversation, and thank you so much for coming and sharing all about OctoPrint and what you do. For anyone that's listening, if you're not familiar, if you have a 3D printer, go check it out. Run it on a Raspberry Pi 3. Donate to the project, because this is one of those successful open source projects that has been around for a while. I was a user for a long time. I am also a donator. So I encourage everyone else to like go out there, and it's great having it integrated like GitHub sponsorships and all those things that you have for the project. Make it really easy. Just say like, oh yeah, here's $10. Here's a recurring, buck or two. All those things go a long way to help, promote the work and really promote the like idea behind successful open source that can be community run and community funded is an awesome success story.
Yes. I hope that people take this success story and, it proves to them that this can be a model for open source.
It's possible. Thank you so much, Gina.
Thank you for having me. It was a blast.
Thank you so much, Gina, for coming to talk to us and letting us ask you all the questions, and your interview was great. Do we have stuff listed for people to find Gina? All her links and everything should be.
Yeah, we have a couple links in the show notes, as well as a blog post and a slide deck that she had for a presentation. So we have a couple things there that people can go check out. It's in the show notes.
Gina is amazing. She speaks multiple languages, not just programming languages. She does all the things. And she's on Mastodon, right? Yeah, so definitely go check her out and support her because she's amazing. So for our outro game, we're going to do K8s versus 3D printers, where Justin's going to guess. I feel like he's cheating because he knows all Kubernetes things, but we're going to try.
I do not know all Kubernetes things.
You know like way too many of the projects, but we're going to try.
I've been 3D printing about as long as I've been using Kubernetes. So in both cases, it's about 10 years. So hopefully I will know some of these things. But if when we're naming 3D printers, is that what it is?
Oh, should we do 3D printers, or should we do fake 3D printing names versus real ones?
We can't go back and forth. You got to pick up your kids in 10 minutes.
I know, it's like so hard because I want it to be as good as your games. And I feel like you're going to get all the Kubernetes ones. It's really hard to test you on stuff.
I think you should do 3D or K. 3D or K8.
I feel like this is cheating, but we'll try.
We'll see. You can pick again. You don't have to do the filtered. You can go with any CNCF project, and I'll see if but again, like some of the 3D printer names are pretty far out there.
Okay, let's try Fusion. K8 or 3D printer.
Jeez, that's actually hard.
I looked really hard for these. Okay, I
think that's K8. I think it's a CNC.
3D printer.
Dang it. It could go either way. All right. So that's there's a 3D printer called Fusion.
Yes.
It's a good name. I mean, that makes sense.
It is.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's do. Oh, this is so hard because you know all the K8 things. Like, okay. Argo.
Argo is absolutely a K8 name.
Damn it. I don't know enough about Kubernetes to know what's obscure and what's not. It's not fair.
I actually have the Argo stuffed animal, the octopus that they have.
I should have known.
Or my son
you have
has it,
all the
so.
cool stuff. Okay, Clip.
Clip?
Yeah.
CLIP?
Yes.
That's got to be a K8. It's got to be.
Is a printer. Continuous liquid interface production.
Oh, it's a liquid? Okay, so it's like a... what's it called? The laser... I forget what they call it, but yeah, the...
It looked cool. I don't know. Like...
the immersion... Not the immersion. What do they call them? I had one. The Form Labs. The Form Labs had one.
This is also dangerous because I'm going to somehow end up with a 3D printer from this.
You're like, that one looks cool. So.
I know. I'm like, I want a new one so bad. I feel like you're going to know what this is, but like some of these are like really popular names.
Yeah. And there's a lot of older ones. There's quite a few that were very popular.
Yeah. Like it's hard to figure out which ones are not popular anymore.
I mean, it's the same problem with Kubernetes too. There are some very popular.
Thanos?
That is K8 because it's a Prometheus aggregator, I think.
This is why we can't test you on Kubernetes. Like, this doesn't work. Duet.
Duet?
Yeah.
That doesn't sound Kubernetes to me, so I'm going to say printer.
It is a printer.
Yes! Duet. That's an interesting name for a printer, though.
HDX. Airwolf.
An Airwolf?
Mm-hmm.
That's got to be a printer.
Damn it.
That's that sounds too cool for Kubernetes. I'm sorry. An Airwolf.
Axiom?
AXIOM?
Mm-hmm.
Axiom.
Maybe.
That's Kubernetes.
That is a printer, unless
it's
Kubernetes
a printer?
has one too.
No. It's
Some of these I'm like, it could be both.
That's the
know?
ship. That's the ship from Wall-E.
Yeah.
The Axiom. And it's I there was an internal project that I was familiar with
really
called
cool,
Axiom. So
and it kind of looks like some of these on this one from Airwolf, they almost remind me. Here, I'll send it to you. They almost remind me of, you know what the old iMacs used to look like? The ones that were clear. And I'm like, oh, now I need one of these too. We're going to get distracted and I'm going to buy a 3D printer. Like, okay. This is probably too popular, but Micro Rocks.
Micro Rocks?
Mm-hmm.
Printer.
Kubernetes.
Dang it. I don't know. What's that one do? What? Micro Rocks? Is
Microx.
it ROX?
Microx? No. It is... If I send you the link, will it show? Wait, we forgot. How many did you get right or wrong?
Oh, Microcates?
No, it's Microx.
Microx. Okay.
I'm just excited I found something in Kubernetes that you didn't know what it is. I'm so excited right now.
Testing. Okay, Microx. Yeah, no idea on that one.
Last one. Parsec?
Is it Parsec?
Yeah.
Kubernetes.
Maybe. Damn it. It's really hard to find something Kubernetes that doesn't have the word qubit in it.
It's true. It's gonna have a K or it's gonna sound very Greek.
Schooner.
Schooner?
Printer or Kubernetes.
Schooner.
This is so much fun.
That's bizarre. I'm just gonna go with printer on that one.
That's a Kubernetes. I'm so excited I had two that you couldn't guess.
Schooner?
Do you know how hard it is to find things on Kubernetes that don't have the word qubit in it? Like, it's so hard.
I had a K. I should have known. Yeah, okay. Oh, it's a dashboard. All right. Good times.
Look, if you were just pretending to not know to make me feel better, I appreciate it because it gave me joy to finally find something that you don't know. Also, now I'm just like, I want to try all these things.
I'm going to be quizzing you on whatever our next thing is versus Java.
Okay, one last thing. Eraser.
Eraser. That would be the opposite of a 3D printer.
I know, but it's a cool name.
So yeah, I'm going to say it's a 3D printer because I don't know of any
Kubernetes
thing. Dang, eraser? There's not even a K in there.
I know. I was like, this doesn't even... Great. I was like, I don't know if I would think it was either. So I was like, look, it took like...
All right.
I thought really hard about this.
Oh, it's an image cleanup tool. Ah, yeah. Okay, that makes sense.
I was
There's a
like,
couple of those. Good
you
times.
almost make me want to do Kubernetes, and then I see things like this where there's way too much to learn, and I'm like, oh no, like
Oh.
maybe I'll stick in Java and data.
Right. Java and data, that's a small subset of things you have to learn.
It makes me feel better than like that. I'll just run data things in Java in a very simple Kubernetes thing. Do you guys do simple? I don't think y'all know what that is. Like,
Yeah, probably not. Thanks everyone for joining and listening to the show. One last time, I'll shout out that I'm going to be traveling near the end of June because I think this is the last episode that's going to come out before SRE Day. So SRE Day in San Francisco, I'm talking there, and we'll be around if you want to come. I will also have changelog stickers and Cloud Native Security Con in Seattle at the end of June. I will also be speaking there and have stickers, hopefully enough for everyone.
and hopefully he can sneak me into the Kubernetes thing because I just love the Kubernetes crowd. I don't know what y'all do special in Kubernetes, but you guys have one of the best open source communities. Like, I love meeting all the Kubernetes people. So
I will
Justin, sneak me in.
100% give credit to setting up the community in a very deliberate way by people like Sarah Novotny, who was one of the very first like community leads for Kubernetes. And
Whatever y'all did community wise, it worked. Like, you guys have, like, people are fire. They're so fun. They've all got like cool hair. Like, I was just like, I will learn how to run Kubernetes for y'all. I just want to hang out with you. That and the Postgres community seems very welcome too.
Yes. So thanks, Autumn, and thank you all for joining. We'll talk to you again soon.
Bye, guys.
Thanks for listening to Ship It with Justin Garrison and Autumn Nash. Subscribe now if you haven't already. Head to shipit.show for all the ways, or just search for Ship It wherever you get your podcasts. You'll find us. Thanks once again to our partners at fly.io, to the mysterious Breakmaster Cylinder for these dope beats, and to Sentry. Use code CHANGELOG when you sign up and save $100 off their team plan. That's all for now, but come back next week when we continue discussing everything that happens after Git Push.